One of the ways to create great moments in games is to remember the first rule of improv, yes and. Given games are an interactive medium, it serves that as much as possible, developers should accept and build upon the player's desires, like you would with an improv partner. Far Cry 4 does this by throwing the player a bone at the very beginning of the game that subverts their expectations. The game opens with an introduction to the player character, Ajay Ghale. We also learn about his mission to take his mother's ashes back to Lakshmana in their home country of Kyrat. Kyrat is a fictional country in the Himalayas, which was named after the group of Kyrat people who are indigenous to the region in real life. It also happens to be a country run by the game's main antagonist, Pagan Min, who we also are introduced to in this sequence. After the response to Voss from the third game, charismatic villains would be painted as the poster boys for the series, with the personalities of their heroes largely receding into the background. Far Cry 4 was the first game in the series to repeat this trend, and quickly gets to work showcasing Pagan's sadistic and manipulative tendencies. While he treats Ajay relatively well, it might be an understatement to say he runs a tight ship and takes his organization very seriously. After a little foreshadowing by the hook from Should I Stay or Should I Go, and a title drop, the cutscene continues with Ajay and Pagan sitting across from each other. Pagan continues developing his character by showing Ajay courtesy by further introducing himself and eating his mother's ashes, while showing others a little less courtesy by literally stabbing them in the back. Towards the end of the scene, before Pagan goes to handle some business, he says,
"Terrorists, right? Now, please, stay right here. Enjoy the crab rangoon. Don't move. I will be right back. Yuma, we need to talk."
After this, Ajay stands up and the player assumes control for the first time. Now, most players would likely follow the prompts or simply start moving around because that's just what you do in games after a cutscene. But if they do follow Pagan's instructions and wait for about 13 minutes, they'll be pleasantly surprised by Pagan coming back, inviting Ajay to take a ride with him, and giving him some more information about his family as he guides Ajay to lay his mother's ashes to rest next to his half-sister Lakshmana. Then, they both go in the words of Pagan,
"Oh, good. You feel better now? Get it out of your system? Good. Maybe now we can finally shoot some goddamn guns."
and roll credits. For some additional context, this is actually one of the real endings of the game. At the end of the main storyline, Pagan recalls his first time meeting Ajay and reminds him of what he said.
But we tried that before, didn't we? At our first meeting? You sat right here. Paul was off applying voltage to the nipples of your rude little plus one. I stood just like this. And what were my exact words? Stay here. Enjoy the crab rangoon. Don't move. I'll be right back. Now, if you had just listened, just waited for me, then we would have come back here straight away, together, and scattered your mother's ashes.
Now at this point, the player can choose to listen to Pagan, like he offered the first time, and continue with the sequence we just went through, or they can shoot him in the head, leaving Ajay's mission unfulfilled. There are also a few hints of dramatic irony in the dialogue after shooting Pagan that maybe listening to him was the right choice all along.
Pagan's dead.
It's over. I can't believe we won. Did you find Lakshmana?
No. I don't know what it is. It's not important.
No. You're right. What matters now is rebuilding Kyrat together.
This sequence, along with the hidden ending, give me real "a man chooses, a slave obeys" and "do you feel like a hero yet" vibes. Two iconic lines from two of the best narratives about interactivity in games. The main reason I love the hidden ending is because of how it plays with the player's expectations. Since games, especially ones with massive budgets that they need to make back, usually try to be as direct and frictionless as possible, they typically try to appeal to the widest possible audience. This leads to removing frustration that might make players drop the game by guiding them using strategies ranging from basic quest markers to throwing colored paint all over a level. And for players that have gotten used to relying on these additions, the prompt at the top of the screen after the initial cutscene guides them right to the gameplay experience they were expecting. while players who feel cheeky and were listening closely to Pagan's words are rewarded for their observation with a surprising, fun moment. In virtually every aspect, Far Cry games after 3 take a very, very heavy dose of inspiration from that game, to the point where they can become indistinguishable after you look past their different locales and villains. This hidden ending serves to inject something that the developers clearly thought would be an interesting twist into the story because of how it plays with players' expectations of not only how they interact with games in general, but also this specific series of games. I mean, people aren't really out here praising the stories of the Far Cry games as masterpieces, but after their narrative high point in Far Cry 3, it was really cool to have a bit of an Easter egg tied directly into a portion of the game many people don't think about too much. It's also an example of giving players narrative agency in an unconventional way. Most games rely on button prompts or dialogue choices at specific moments to allow players to choose how the story progresses. These act similarly to a choose-your-own-adventure book or some of the more experimental shows and movies on Netflix. The way Far Cry 4 relies on player input, or a lack of it in this instance, is something that I think is worth exploring more in games, because it's something that they can excel at when compared to other mediums. In the modern day, the legacy of the Far Cry series has largely become one of predictability. Some view this predictability as stagnation that leads to gameplay and stories that are rote, bland, and boring. Others view it as comforting and easy to slip into, while offering the opportunity to create chaos in a way that not many other games replicate. However you see them, it's always worth noting where the series broke the mold to try something different. Far Cry 4's hidden ending, while only an Easter egg that wouldn't be noticed by most players, was one of these instances. Here, the developers at Ubisoft were able to play with players' expectations and answer the age-old question of, "Can I really do that?" with a resounding, "Go right ahead." It serves as an example that when looking to create great experiences in games, you should always be thinking about how you can give a player more agency and what they might want to do in any given moment.